I really just think that when we have these core wounds, it's so important. And trust me, I have had to do a lot of work on myself. A lot of healing has had to happen over the years, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of acceptance. When we learn to not reject these parts of ourselves, that's really when we can start to move forward and be whole.
Welcome to the Shine Strategy Podcast, where entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business owners are getting visible and changing the world. I'm your host, Heather Burgett, an award-winning publicist, entrepreneur, and business mentor. Today's show is sponsored by PR Stars. For more inspiration and Shine strategies, head over to shineinsiders.com now for my free masterclass so that you too can get visible and go from local to global.
Hey, Shine Insiders. Oh my gosh, it has been an intense couple of weeks. Most of you in my community know that we did go dark a couple of episodes ago in honor of my father, who just passed away. At the time of this recording, he died a week and a half ago, and I just got back to Santa Monica a couple of nights ago, and we only had his graveside memorial service 5 days ago. So this is all very intense, very fresh. And I really just felt that this was an opportunity to talk about something that I've never really talked about publicly before. And that is about my relationship with my father. And so this episode, we're doing something a little different. You're just going to be hearing from me today, which we haven't done since the very first episode 0, or the introductory episode. And here I go again, doing something that really is outside of my comfort zone, talking about some very personal things, doing it on my own. The solo episodes for me are actually even more challenging than the conversational interview style ones that we normally do. So I just want to do this because I feel like it's a way for me to stretch my boundaries and grow and continue to evolve as a human being. And also, maybe my story and the story of my father will help someone else out there who might be dealing with some similar things. Now, I find it so ironic. Gosh, the couple past episodes we had Rob Dial recently, and he actually talked about his father dying from alcoholism. And cirrhosis is what just took my father. And that is the liver failure, with typically being caused by alcoholism and abuse that just pretty much destroys the liver. And it is not a pretty disease. We also recently talked to Sophia Para and her experience with when her dad had cancer and what that was like, having to run her business and kind of make things work while dealing with the reality that her father was very sick and possibly dying. And luckily he didn't pass. He got better. But in this case, my father went into hospice and was gone very quickly. And, with the amount of impact that this has had on my life, it only feels right to share it. And if you are going through anything similar with a loved one out there, this is also just letting you know that you're not alone. None of this stuff is easy. I knew the last couple of years that my father was going to be passing soon. His health really started to decline when they diagnosed him a couple years back, and it was just a matter of time. And that doesn't make it any easier when it finally happens, because losing a loved one is never easy, no matter how the relationship was. It's especially a parent, it's especially hard. I know my father loved me more than anything. I never doubted that, but he also had demons, like we all do. And there were some things that happened with my dad when I was a little girl, and they were things I never really wanted to talk about. He actually left me and my mom when I was a baby for another woman, and he was the party guy. My dad was the big man on campus. He met my mom at UMass Amherst, which was a big party school. He was a teak. He was the life of the party. And eventually that caught up with him. I think a lot of people do party, in those younger days in their, college years, their 20s. Unfortunately, my dad had a terrible drinking and driving accident when I was about 6. And he slid through an intersection on a rainy night, slid into, I think, an older woman that was driving. They had a pretty bad head-on collision, and she survived, thank goodness. I don't know, to this day, I don't really know what happened to her. I just know that she did survive. And my father almost died. He was in a coma. They didn't think he was going to make it. He did hit his head. He had a frontal lobe injury. And for any of you that know anything about that out there, that is pretty much your center of just who you are, your will, your passion, your drive, your ambition, your desires. And when that gets destroyed, it affects your short-term memory. So, my dad, after the accident, he did finally recover. You pretty much lose your short-term memory. I mean, he could remember going back to his time in Vietnam when he was a younger guy, but you ask him something about the day before, and he very likely would not remember or already have forgotten. And of course, towards the end, it did get really bad to the point where you would tell him something, and a few minutes later, he would not even remember. So the fact that my dad had this terrible accident was very scary as a little girl. I loved my dad. I used to see him on Sundays. He would give me the world. He'd take me out. We'd have a wonderful time. And, then I wasn't really able to see him that much. He had a lot of healing and recovering to do. And he also couldn't really hold that much of a job after he had this brain injury. And the interesting thing was, and this is, what I've learned a lot about my father, especially in his passing, going home, being with all my family, going through, my uncle had his briefcase from when he worked as a funds manager on the Air Force Base in Phuket during Vietnam. And my dad was managing a $36 million budget at the time, which now would probably be like $900 million. He was getting honors and commendations. He got his business degree at UMass Amherst. He was very into learning business and administration. And he actually started one of the first screen printing businesses in the Boston area. In Natick, Massachusetts, there was a shop he started called Chest Fever. And I don't know if any of you remember from back in the 70s when, the iron-ons, the press-ons on the t-shirts, like that was all the rage. And he was doing that. And he was one of the first in his area. You could pick out the design and then have it screen pressed or printed right there in the shop and walk out with your, shirt that you picked out. And then I think it was not too long after that Wild Top started, which was in all the malls. And it was the same concept that my dad had created. And so he was doing really well. I mean, he was getting contracts from Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And, he was a young guy in his 20s, just rocking and rolling with this business. And I remember as a little girl going in there and just thinking it was the coolest thing ever, seeing him run around and handle all the business and getting to pick out, a design for a shirt. I picked an elephant one time. Another time it was a Snoopy shirt. And it just, it was a really nice memory to be there in the shop with him and my uncle. He was kind of grooming in the business. And then the accident happened. His second wife left him. His best friend took over the business, which his perspective was always that it kind of got stolen out from under him. I think maybe he bought it off him, but I do know that in talking to my family recently that, that is one of my grandfather's biggest regrets was that they didn't keep that business in the family, which years later went on to have multi-million-dollar contracts with companies and accounts like Coca-Cola. So I just have always kind of felt like this is, my dad was sort of this cautionary tale of just bad decisions or partying at the wrong times, like obviously drinking and driving. Like that one night, that one moment, that one crash, that one incident changed the lives of so many people. His own, the woman he hit, I'm sure, my life, all of his family, his parents, his siblings. This was something that was very hard on my entire family. And I grew up going to a very nice New England prep school. It's, I think it's more expensive than some colleges now, but my mom worked at the school. So I was lucky. I lived in the town and I got to go for free as a day student because my mom was employed at this really nice international prep school. Kids from all over the world were there. And a majority of them came from very wealthy families. I did not. It was a bit intimidating when your high school friends include extended family of the Kennedys. The one dreaded question I always had was when someone would ask me, what does your dad do? Because after the accident, as I mentioned, he lost his business and had a tough time keeping a job. He could do little odd jobs for a while, like security guard, delivering auto parts. His mind was just never quite the same again. His capacities were never full again. And he finally did get employed by the local high school in custodial services. So my dad ended up working, and he did a good job at his, job. He went in every day. He was a creature of habit. He got the job done. So he did still have the capability to keep a schedule and focus to a certain point. But, to me, that was always a bit of a point of embarrassment. Was here I'm going to school with kids with all these very well-to-do families and parents that have these, high-profile jobs. And my dad was a janitor. He was working over 20 years in that role. And so that was, a question I often skirted around when someone, especially like a friend's parent, would say, "Oh, what does your dad do?" It was like, how do I tell them this whole story, that my dad was a very successful businessman and things just didn't go his way. So I think I would sometimes just say, "Oh, he had an accident and he doesn't really do as much as he used to anymore." And, it was just a dreaded question. And I hate that, to even admit that now of, the shame or embarrassment I felt for my father. And it was just the environment that I was in at the time. And it's okay. It's okay that that's what he ended up doing. And there's been a lot I've had to accept. So that's why I thought today it would be interesting to talk about core wounds and how they affect us in our lives. And I would say that if I had to go back and pick one or two core wounds, it was probably my father leaving when I was a baby, and then the accident and how that impacted my life for years to come and still to this day. I've had to learn that my self-worth didn't come from what I did or what my family did, but how they did it and how I did it. I've learned to have a sense of integrity and be of my word because I didn't have anything else to fall back on. And, coming from a working class family taught me so much. My paternal grandfather, my grandpa Burgett, my dad's dad, always said, "It's not a crime to be poor, but it sure is an inconvenience." That was that was what I grew up with, that sort of mentality. And I really just think that when we have these core wounds, it's so important. And trust me, I have had to do a lot of work on myself. A lot of healing has had to happen over the years, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of acceptance. When we learn to not reject these parts of ourselves, that's really when we can start to move forward and be whole. Because there's always something, don't you feel like there are these pieces of your life that you just don't want in your life, or maybe you don't like certain things about what you've experienced or parts of your family, or who knows what it may be. But in rejecting those things, we're rejecting a piece of ourselves. So that was really a big lesson that I had to learn, was how to be accepting of me every bit, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that I didn't, want to have as part of my experience, but they were. So really surrendering to that has been a huge lesson. And I wasn't even sure until this past Christmas when I went home to see my dad if he had been drunk during his accident. I think I maybe didn't want to know for many years because that just kind of added to the frustration of all that had happened. He full on admitted and just said, "Yeah, I was schnockered." So, the issues that come with alcoholism or addiction or abuse in that way, they run deep. And because of the sort of limitations my father had after the accident, he wasn't really in a position to even have the wherewithal to understand or acknowledge what he maybe had done wrong or could have done differently. The only thing I ever really heard in terms of regrets from him was, I guess he has told my uncle, more than once, that leaving me and my mom was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made. And that's hard to hear because that did change everything. I ended up growing up in a household with a very authoritarian, how do you say it? Authoritarian type upbringing with my stepfather, who was very authoritative. Maybe that's better said. And, it changed everything. So I talked to my dad a lot when he was passing. I was with him in his final day, his final hours, his final breath. And I feel like I truly was there to help him cross over and transition. And I feel like he waited for me as well. And, just telling him that I did forgive him and that he doesn't need to worry about any of his transgressions in life. And he was actually very Catholic, even though he didn't go to church much later in life. But I said, God forgives you for your trespasses. That's the whole thing about the Lord's Prayer. And I forgave him and just told him how much I loved him. And I just know how much things could have been different. It's almost like you see sliding doors of your life sometimes where, wow, if that one accident hadn't happened, how different would my life be today? How much easier could my life have been? But that's not what happened. And this is the life we all have. And we go with it. We run with it. This is something I've always kept this part of my story very personal and private. I have to say that this podcast really has changed my life because talking to Rob, having that conversation we had with him in this last episode, it gave me the inspiration and the courage to be able to share my story. And I think it's just time, with him passing, to be able to express what that has meant to me all of these years. And it has affected me, my maybe core wounds, including like fear of abandonment or being able to trust people or fear of someone cheating. And I know a lot of people struggle with these things. I actually did go to some Al-Anon groups as an adult because I was defaulting into some unhealthy relationships. And I needed to get that perspective to let that go, that piece go. And this is after years and years of work thinking that I'd already gotten over this stuff. And then here comes a person that is the mirror to show you where you still need to grow. And there was still a lot of healing that I had to do there. So I think the biggest thing I learned from Al-Anon was, and this is what I see what my grandparents did with my dad. They did take him back in after the accident, and he lived, there the rest of his adult life. They really took care of him. And if you have someone in your life that is an addict or an alcoholic and they're abusing those chemicals or substances, you have two choices to make. And that is you accept them and their disease, their addiction, whatever you want to call it, with all that it comes with. And you don't try to change that person or fix them because it's their journey. It's not your responsibility. And it's up to them to step up and want to get the help and get better. And sometimes that never happens. So you either accept them with all that comes with, or you cut them out of your life if you don't want that presence or behavior in your life. And I see how much of a sacrifice my grandparents made to take care of my dad for all those years, keep him under their wing, keep him in check. He continued to drink the rest of his life. There were some tough times. And we just put my dad's ashes in with my grandmother in the family plot because that's what she would have wanted. You know, she loved him so much, her firstborn, and she made the choice to accept him with whatever issues he had and just get through it with him. That was very peaceful and reassuring to know that we were laying him to rest in the same plot as my grandmother. We think that's what she would have wanted. You know, it's just, you guys, I say sometimes my dad's story is like a cautionary tale. He was just like I said, the life of the party before the accident. He was so happy, energetic, fun, a joker, a party starter. He did anything he could for me, gave me anything that I asked for, took me anywhere I wanted to go, whether it was the candy store to feed the ducks, the record store. He bought me my first 45 vinyl records. I think it was I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and Celebration by Kool and the Gang were a couple of my first 45 records. He even took me to my first movie, and you guys know how much I love movies. I came to LA to work in film publicity because I'm, a movie junkie. And in my small town where I grew up, we only had one movie theater to go to, and one weekend he came up to take me out, and I begged him to take me to the movies. I had been dying to go to the movies. I was probably, 5 years old or something, and it was a horror movie playing. But I begged and begged and begged and begged, and he told me I wouldn't like it, but he finally got the tickets because I think he just always wanted to give me whatever I wanted, probably to make up for his, not being there. And within the first 5 minutes, I had my head in my hands after seeing a guy open an oven that had a head in it. I don't even know the name of the movie to this day, but it was pretty much a horror movie. So he asked if I wanted to leave. I said yes. We immediately left. He just never wanted to say no to me. Another funny memory I have of him is he used to let me sit in his lap when he was driving. He had this big, dark green van, and it was the 70s. Seatbelts were not quite such a big deal back then, and I just thought he was so fun, and we were so happy together, and I would sit in his lap while we were driving, and we were just having a great time, listening to music. My dad always had the radio on, and an officer drove by and yelled at us saying, she can't be in your lap. So I think after that day, I went back to the passenger seat because I didn't want to get in trouble with the police. He was a good dad. And he, and this is what I said, I spoke at his memorial graveside service, and, we had the military honors. 2 Air Force men were there. One played taps. They did the flag ceremony where they open it, they fold it, and then they presented it to me, thanking me for my father's service. And that was pretty powerful. I told everyone, I said, I know my dad loved me. I never questioned that. And actually, he did express it. Every Christmas, every holiday, every birthday, he never forgot a holiday. I would get the nicest greeting card in the mail from him. And he let Hallmark say what he couldn't say. I mean, he must have spent a lot of time picking out these cards because they were always just so beautiful. And it was always just signed, Love Dad, XOXO. Usually there'd be cash or a check in there. And it was his way of just letting me know how much he did care and love me. And, we would talk on the phone and we would say we loved each other. So there was enough of that expression there. But, it was just different because my dad wasn't a typical dad. So it's taken me a lot to come to terms with what happened to my father and how that affected my life and the whole family. And he continued to self-medicate through most of his life. He never really got much help or treatment as far as any of us know. I mean, I think a lot of us tried to get him to do things over the years. But as I just said, you can't force someone. They have to want to do it. And maybe it was also partially a side effect of the brain injury, that he just didn't have that drive or capacity to change his life or change things. But he did always love his family. He loved music. I know he loved me. And his heart was always in the right place, even when he was struggling with his demons. He always stayed, no matter how dark things got for my father, he always stayed connected to his family. I'm really honored that my father waited for me to be by his side for his passing. It wasn't pretty. Cirrhosis is not a pretty disease, as I mentioned. His liver was failing. He was going into renal failure, among so many other health issues. He was very large and bloated. The last couple of years, he pretty much was, just laying around in a nursing home. And we always tried to get him to do activities, exercises, but he just had no desire to do anything, no interest really in anything. And it was really just him sitting around watching his favorite sports, Boston sports teams, and having family visit. But he was happy. And, to all of us on the outside, we thought, oh gosh, what a horrible or sad existence. And kind of broke my heart. My aunt told me that the last week before, they put him into hospice and he had his last hospital admittance when things were starting to go really wrong. And he told her that he just wanted to get better. And she had the heartbreaking job of telling him, like, that's just not going to happen. The doctors have done all they can do. And so he had to accept his fate, the bed that he had created. And to abuse your body for 50 years, there is going to come a time where there will be consequences for that. And he paid very dearly for that. And I'm glad it went quickly in the end. So he's now out of suffering and pain. And we were lucky to have him as long as we did. And he'll always be my daddy. I told him, you'll always be my daddy. I'll always be your pumpkin. He used to call me Pumpkin as a kid. And I just, I really truly know after, especially going through his Vietnam briefcase with all the papers he saved, this guy, he was into business. He had an entrepreneurial spirit. I really feel that I got that from him. And I've had a lot of experiences when people cross over, I get communications from them or hear them talking to me or see things. Or if any of you heard my interview on the Mac Maloney's podcast recently, he talks a lot about paranormal stuff. I share an experience where I actually saw my grandfather after he passed as an apparition. I'll put that link in the show notes if any of you are into that stuff and you want to hear more about it. But I feel like we always get affirmations and winks and communication from our loved ones when they do cross over to let us know that they are free. They're in a better place. They're back to all that is of higher consciousness, and whatever you believe that is, I personally do believe that it is a place and state of pure bliss and nothingness in some ways, but just eternal being and consciousness. And when you're in that state, you can do just about anything. So I definitely felt my father zipping around, like forgetting how easy and wonderful it was to not be burdened by his body and all the health issues he had later in life. And we had a lovely graveside memorial. The family was together. We honored him. We all got together after. And then my aunt said she wanted to take me for pina coladas. So my aunt and I went to this place she had been wanting to check out, kind of an outdoor situation with a pond and live music and a tiki bar theme. And we had pina coladas. And we said, we think Dad would be pretty cool with us honoring him with pina coladas to toast him and honor him. So we left. We went back to my aunt's house for a little bit. And then I go to get in the car to leave. And I turn on the car, the radio's on, and guess what I hear coming through the radio? Yes, I like pina coladas. You guys, it was the frickin' Escape song, the Pina Colada song. And exactly where he says in that moment, yes, I like pina coladas. So I almost fell out of the car. I immediately videoed so I could, send a text to my aunt with the song on it. I was like, you're not going to believe what's happening. Like, when's the last time we had pina coladas? And much less, heard the Pina Colada song. And for sure, I felt like you can't make this stuff up. Like, I think that was a little wink from my dad in the universe, just saying, yeah, it's all good. He likes pina coladas. He gets it. He's happy with what you're doing and how you're processing this, and he's in a better place. So, all of this to just say and share with you, like, this is about honoring ourselves and our life experiences and what we've been through and what our families have been through. And it all plays into who we are today. I mean, I really don't regret anything I've been through. I mean, yes, some of it was very hard to go through, but man, do I know that it has built me into a very, a person with very high integrity and just so much resilience. I feel like I could get through anything and make it through anything. And still not having found my life partner, I've had to go through some of these challenging times alone. And after having been through my grandmother's passing a couple years back and doing home hospice with her and being with her when she crossed over, and now my father, it is like, I feel like I could do anything. If I can make it through that, the human soul releasing from the body in sort of a natural type death, meaning not like an accident or something sudden or fast, it is a process, you guys. Like seeing how the spirit has to let go of the mortal coil and surrender and accept to be free again, to get to that state of eternal bliss again. It's ugly and beautiful at the same time. There's something they call the death rattle. Any of you that have ever been with someone as they've passed, it's typically happening because they can no longer swallow their own secretions. So they start to have this fluid build up in their throat and their chest, and it is hard to watch. It's probably harder on us. I think, they're so close to releasing. It's usually, very close to the end, and they're kind of in and out, I think, between dimensions at that point. They are in the process of crossing over, but watching your loved one in their body, seeing them in that state, which is probably painful. Typically, you're having morphine to help them ease that pain and slip out of the body. That's what really the morphine does, is it helps them slip and cross out and cross over into, the afterlife. But wow, man, that is intense. It's truly intense. And I felt with my grandmother, when I felt her spirit leave, and it was just such a rush of like bliss and joy. And I just said, she's free. Like I could feel that she was free. And the same thing happened with my father. In his final breath, it was such a relief to see him no longer suffering, and I could see him zipping around in his, like, a younger version of himself, and just being so happy and celebrating that he was in a whole state again, which he had not been for many, many years. So, gosh, this has been a very intense thing to talk about, and hopefully I'm not bringing everybody's day down in talking so much about death and crossing over and all these intense issues of alcoholism and all of these things, but it's life. And I know a lot of people out there are dealing with a lot of this stuff. So if anybody feels like they want to reach out to me, you can always shoot me an email at heather@prstars.net. I'm here for you too. Know you're not alone, that we're all going through these crazy things that happen in life. And I just always like to think back to what my Grandma Martin, my maternal grandmother, she would always say, life goes on. And it's so true, we want to stop and we want to honor and process and, but hello, life is moving forward. So it's yes, we need to take that time to honor ourselves and what we need to go through. But at the same time, I'm my dad wouldn't want me to be passing up opportunities and wallowing around. And because of him, I know that in his heart, he would want me to keep moving forward, making the most of my life and doing whatever makes me happy. And that is doing this right now, talking to you, keeping my podcast going. So that's why I just really wanted to do a special episode to honor everything that my family is going through, honor my father, his life. It wasn't perfect, but nothing is, Life is imperfect, and that's what makes it special. And we all have unique characteristics that are the culmination of the things we've experienced in our life. And we're the only ones that judge them. So letting go of that judgment and just accepting, this is who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it may be. I hope you can all embrace those parts of yourselves and not try to reject them, because that is what makes us whole. You know, the light and the dark. The light cannot exist without the dark. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm ready to get off my soapbox. And I love you guys all so much. I mean, the words, the comments, the emails, the messages, all the thoughts, prayers, kind words coming through during this challenging time are beyond appreciated. I mean, it really has warmed my heart and soul and made me not feel so alone. Knowing that all of you are out there and that we're all in this together, I just hope that you make the most of your day today and reach out. If there's anyone in your life that maybe you've been angry at or frustrated with or holding resentment towards, look at that. Think about forgiving them and forgive yourself for any harshness that you may have had about how you've handled a situation. We're always the toughest on ourselves, aren't we? So be gentle with yourself. Forgive yourself. Forgive the people in your life that are your family and that you know they love you, even if they don't always show it in the best way. And I just hope that we can all continue on this journey together to grow, to love, to experience life, and just have joy. You know, that's what this life is about. It's the human interaction, the connection, the joy we can create together. All right, you guys, thank you so much again for being here. I love you, and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the Shine Strategy Podcast. I invite you to join me at shineinsiders.com for a free masterclass where you can get more inspiration and strategies to get visible and change the world. Your voice matters. Please subscribe, rate, and share this show so we can continue to grow on this journey together. Until the next one, it's Heather Burgett, your Shine Strategist, signing off.